Yeah, he was there at the beginning as well. You know, so they really invested in it, and you know, they clearly believe that they can win at least black male votes at the very least. And I'll tell you how you know they're for real. It's one thing to just say these things over and over again. It's another thing when they go for the nasty attack.
I'm grateful for the spotlight that President Trump is putting on New York City public housing. I think it's wrong that the Democrats put illegal immigrants before black Americans. How is it that we have people waiting on the waiting list for New York City public housing for 10 years or more, but yet we have illegal immigrants living here? Something is wrong with that picture.
Okay, so when they're pulling out the illegal immigrants and all that kind of stuff, you're going, okay, they're really serious about this. They think they can win black votes. And so I found that really interesting. If I was the Democrats, I'd be nervous about that, the fact they were so invested in it.
Yeah. Some people were suggesting, though, that this isn't genuine outreach for the African-American vote. Yes, on the one hand, Trump feels as though there's a market opportunity there because he's only getting 5% of black women and he's only getting 10 to 12% of black men. So room for growth there in a pure business sense. Others were saying, no, look, this is really more about talking to the white suburban couples like the McCloskeys who are there in their front yard waving guns at black people to say to them, see, we're not really racist, we have black people too. And so it was more about providing a permission structure to them. What do you think of that argument?
I think normally I would ascribe to that myself. I think that's a very good argument, but just the sheer commitment of time. They only need to do that 2 or 3 times to do what you just said. They don't need to have 4 people a night, and often in really high profile slots as well, like right at the end there as well. I think they really are going for the black vote.
Yeah.
And they also, I thought, tied it quite cleverly, the issue of race, to violent crime, which is the other issue they're desperate to get out there to try and elevate as much as possible. In particular, I thought the most effective speaker, not just of tonight, but of the entire convention, this was this week's stutter boy from the Democrats convention, was the widow of David Dorn, who was the only speaker for the entire 4 days who didn't have a scent of partisanship about her. Even these ordinary people who are getting up all the time, you know, lobster fishermen and stuff, always are getting the digs in on the Democrats. She wasn't doing that. She was just telling her story about her husband who died in the riots as a police officer, or an ex-police officer. And I don't think anyone who watched that is going to forget it.
As I slept, looters were ransacking the shop. They shot and killed David in cold blood, and then live streamed his execution and his last moments on earth. David's grandson was watching the video on Facebook in real time, not realizing he was watching his own grandfather dying on the sidewalk. I relive that horror in my mind every single day. My hope is that having you relive it with me now will help shake this country from this nightmare we are witnessing in our cities and bring about positive, peaceful change. Violence and destruction are not legitimate forms of protest. They do not safeguard black lives. They only destroy them.
That is effective.
A very compelling moment. I have to say, I do feel differently, and maybe it's an inconsistent argument on my part. I do feel differently when you see the victims of crime or the survivors of victims of crime, family members and so on, who are there advocating for the status quo out of fear of the alternative. So people saying, we must vote for Donald Trump because then we'll have more things that happened, arguably on Donald Trump's watch, more of those things will happen in the future. There's a kind of a logical leap there that I think is a bit unfortunate. I feel a bit differently, and this is where it may not be a non-contradictory argument on my part, but when you see people like last week at the Democrat convention saying, this thing happened to me, it should change because I want change into the future, that to me seems more logical. So making people in a position of grief fear the future, that's where I feel as though there's a bit of exploitation happening in these situations. And that may or may not be a fair observation, but I do view them differently. Yeah,
that's fair enough. What I was going to say is, in the case of Ann Dorn, she wasn't talking about fearing the future. The worst thing that could happen to her has already happened.
Yeah.
What she was talking about was we need to all get on the same page and agree that protests must not have looting and violence and rioting.
Yeah.
And she's saying...
Nobody disagrees with that. And to be used as a political prop in the same way as the White House itself was being used in a political prop. She may be apolitical. She was advocating for Donald Trump at Donald Trump's convention. So that, to me, I'm a little uncomfortable with.
Okay. Right, well, the other thing which I thought was also very effective was we've kind of forgotten the Donald Trump from 2016. And they did... And he won for a reason. And they did try to bring back the Donald Trump from 2016 on a few occasions. First of all, with a whole bunch of swing state people, interestingly, who were pushing the America First thing, the America First trade thing. We had lobster fishermen, we had bronze manufacturers, we had all kinds of tradesmen and small business people talking about it. But in particular, a really surprise source of this message was Richard Grenell, who was a diplomat and an intelligence guy, and pretty much did everything for the Trump administration.
Became ambassador to Germany. He was acting DNI for a period of time.
Yeah.
Controversial Maggery guy, had been in Romney's orbit previously, but went all in for Trump in 2016.
Yeah, and he came up with, I thought, the best dissertation of Trump 2016 all over again.
So for decades, while Washington politicians built a global system, American wages stagnated. Our great cities and industries were hollowed out. Entire communities were devastated, and our manufacturing plants were shipped off to China. That's what happened when Washington stopped being the capital of the United States and started being the capital of the world.
And I think it might be too late, but I think Trump could do with a bit more of that, to be honest, because that was a winning message 4 years ago, and they have the raw material to work with it after the last 4 years, I feel.
The big contradiction that Trump has yet to overcome in his campaign is he is still campaigning as the angry outsider from the White House, as President of the United States. Talking about, and basically the argument is the swamp monsters are coming back. I've done everything. We got rich. Then this terrible thing happened that wasn't our fault. It was all China's fault. But I'm the one that's going to bring it back. Let's not go back to the political hacks like Joe Biden. That's an interesting argument, but tapping into people's discontent with today by saying, I'm the guy to fix it. I'm not sure that he's selling that particular message. And the polls at the moment suggest he is not selling that particular message, and that people don't have such short memories that they don't recall, and they're being reminded by multi-million-dollar ad spends, everything he said denying that the coronavirus was going to be a problem.
Yeah.
And he was trying to prop up the stock exchange just as he's talking it up now, as if it's some indicator of the economy. And meanwhile, another 1 million people signed on for unemployment last week.
There's simply no way that Donald Trump can escape that. They've just got to do their best to try and get around it, because there is no way he can escape what he said on the record in the biggest issue of not only this election, but for possibly a decade. It's very difficult to get away from that. That's his problem. But yeah, what I would say though is, you've made the point a few times, I think, correctly, that when you're the incumbent, it's hard to run against yourself. But I think I'll give them credit that they really, especially today, Ivanka and Trump, and Pence to a certain extent, they did spend a lot of time talking about what Donald Trump has done. They really did. I was actually surprised. Like, between Ivanka and Trump, there was probably a combined 40 minutes where they spoke about what Donald Trump has done in his 4 years. So they are making the case
Even
that
if
he's
it's
done
like
something.
for the veterans that Obama actually did anyway.
Yeah, well,
but they claim credit for that as well. Look, for more, we're joined by Sam Nunberg. Sam is a former political advisor to Donald Trump. He worked with him on as well as the likes of Roger Stone for many years. Sam later fell out with Donald Trump and was actually sacked and then sued by Donald Trump at one point. In short, they have had their ups and downs. Sam Nunberg, welcome to the Fireside Chat.
Thank you for having me.
I think it's fair to say, Sam, you've had a love-hate relationship with Donald Trump over many years now. After seeing today's speech, what are you feeling, the love or the hate?
Well, I'm very proud of the president. This was a historic speech. Regardless of whether or not you support him or not, we're never going to see something like this again in our lifetimes. Hopefully we never have another election during a pandemic. He spoke about a lot of the issues that I thought he had to touch on. This speech certainly hit home on the major themes and the major direction he wants to take this election and this choice that he wants to make between Biden and himself. Let's see if it works. It's a big gamble. My biggest worry about this is that we have a bunch of COVID cases coming out of the audience, frankly.
Out of the 4 days of this convention, Sam, who was the speaker that you liked the most, and what issue do you think was prosecuted the best?
It's a great question. Well, I think that the speech that came out the most, that I was so surprised to hear, so well done, was Rick Grinnell's speech. He spoke about he explained the president's foreign policy in a way that I think kept the president being seen as not only the incumbent, but as somebody who is really outside of both parties and bringing common sense to foreign policy. The other speech obviously was tonight's. I think that the president was able to really make the case in only the way that he can, that he is going to be the one who is going to be able to get this country out of this pandemic. This was a major contrast, and they're taking a major bet. The president has taken major gambles his whole life, and this is going to be a gamble. And what he's saying is, if you want more shutdowns, if you want mask mandates, I'm not your guy. Go vote for Joe Biden. If you want the country to get back open, you want the economy to get back open, and you want to run on these major right themes, major right choices against left choices, then this is what this election is about. And I think that he was able to frame it. Let's see how long it's able to last, because the Biden campaign is very well funded.
Sam, you talk about the president being a gambler and this being a gamble. If he's making this claim that Joe Biden would surrender the pandemic and we see a tragic uptick in coronavirus deaths between now and November 3rd, that's got to be game over for Donald Trump, surely.
The short answer is it probably is. The longer answer to that is, what is going to be the main issue people go to vote on? What is the main issue? If the exit polls show that COVID is one of the top 3 issues coming out that day, then the president is probably going to lose. If it is not, and it's the economy, it's healthcare, it's foreign policy, it's judges, meaning that it's a normal type of election that we've had in the past, then the president has a very good chance to get reelected. The numbers I have seen from the Trump campaign are, it is a closer race than it appears public, and I do trust them. When you look at likely voters, when you look at what they think that the composite of the electorate's going to be, how many percentage of Republicans are going to be out there compared to what you see in the public polling, I would say in general right now, this is a 5-point race. Joe Biden is ahead by 5 points nationally. But when I say ahead 5 points nationally, remember, gentlemen, that means that Donald Trump polls higher in other states as opposed to California, where he polls lower, in New York. So he's polling higher in Florida. He's close to 50 there. He's close to 50 in Ohio. And he's got a path to 270.
Sam, we've also seen a major theme of both the president's speech earlier today and throughout the week, including Vice President Pence yesterday, really hammering a law and order campaign in the wake of the Black Lives Matter protests and some of the associated lawlessness. This has got sort of, echoes of Richard Nixon 1968. Big difference being, of course, Richard Nixon was out of office in 1968. Donald Trump's trying to say what you're seeing now in America's cities is what you will get when Joe Biden is president, but it's happening while Trump is president. How do you square that circle?
Well, what the president is arguing here, and I agree with you in general, and I did think it was a losing strategy in the beginning. But the way they've recalibrated this message is the following: look at the cities, look at the states where the rioting has been the worst. Look who does not want to accept the National Guard, and look who is talking about defunding the police. Those are all